That is my family's ranch, I said. The guard looked past me at my pickup, then back at the tablet in his hand. According to this, sir, you are not allowed through the gate. I had driven that road since I was 14 years old, and nobody had ever asked my permission to use it, much less told me I could not. Yet there I was, sitting behind the wheel of my old Ford, staring at an 8-foot steel gate that had appeared across Northcutt sometime since my last visit. A white security booth stood beside it. 2 cameras pointed toward the county road. A new sign read Stonehaven Ridge HOA, private access. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The guard stepped closer to my window. His nameplate said Grant Miller. Can I see your identification again? Sure. I handed him my license. Daniel Mercer. The ranch house is about 1.5 miles up this road. Grant checked the license against his tablet. You live inside Stonehaven Ridge? No. Are you visiting a resident? No. He looked up. Then where exactly are you going? I pointed through the gate. Mercer Ranch. The younger guard inside the booth glanced over. Grant typed my name, waited, then frowned. What? I asked. Your name is already here. That is interesting, because I have never registered with you. He turned the tablet away slightly. It says your access has been revoked. I stared at him. Revoked from my own road. I'm just telling you what is in the system. Who put it there? Grant hesitated. The access list comes from the HOA, which means somebody at the HOA knew I was coming. The younger guard picked up his radio. I heard him say, Mercer is at the west gate. Not a visitor. Not a driver. Mercer. I shut off the engine. Grant noticed. Sir, please do not get out of the vehicle. I was not planning to. I looked beyond him. The gravel had been widened near the booth, but underneath the fresh work I could still see the old roadbed. Dad and I had spent half my childhood filling holes in that road after spring runoff. How long has this gate been here? I asked. About 4 months. Who owns the land under it? Grant glanced toward the booth. Stonehaven Ridge controls this entrance. I asked who owns it. He did not answer. That got my attention more than the gate did. I leaned toward the windshield and studied the fence line. The western gate post looked awfully close to where I remembered an old Mercer boundary marker. I could have been wrong. Memory is not a survey, and I was not about to start an argument over something I had not checked. All right, I said. Open the gate, and I will drive straight to the ranch house. Grant shook his head. I cannot do that. Why not? Your status says no access. Then call whoever put my name in there. The younger guard answered before Grant could. Already did. A few seconds passed. Grant handed my license back. Mr. Mercer, until this gets cleared up, you need to remain outside the gate. And if I drive through? He took a breath before answering. We have instructions to report it as trespassing. I looked at him for a second, trying to decide whether he understood how strange that sounded. He looked uncomfortable enough that I figured he did. You know what is up that road, Grant? I know there is private property beyond the development. There is. Mine. He nodded once, but still did not move toward the gate controls. Then the younger guard stepped out of the booth. She is coming down. Who? I asked. Neither man answered. I looked through the gate and saw a black SUV rounding the bend from the Stonehaven Ridge side. It was moving faster than anyone would for a routine visitor problem. Grant straightened his jacket. The younger guard put away his radio. The SUV stopped just inside the gate, and a woman in a navy blazer stepped out carrying a leather folder. She did not ask the guards who I was. She did not look confused to see my truck. She walked directly toward me and said, Mr. Mercer, I was wondering when you would show up. That was when I knew the gate was not the problem. Somebody had been waiting for me. The woman stopped on the other side of the gate and looked at me like I was late for an appointment she had scheduled without telling me. Rebecca Caldwell, she said, president of Stonehaven Ridge. Daniel Mercer. I know. That answer came a little too quickly. I glanced at Grant. He looked down at his tablet. Rebecca opened the leather folder. I assumed the guards explained the access policy. They explained that somebody put my name on a list. Your access privileges were suspended. Privileges. I looked past her toward Northcutt. Rebecca, I am trying to get to my ranch. And this entrance is controlled by the association. There is that word again. She frowned. What word? Controlled. Grant used it too. Does Stonehaven Ridge own this road? She gave me a patient smile that felt practiced. The association maintains the entrance, provides security, and manages access under the development agreements. That was a long answer to a short question. One of the guards looked away. Rebecca's smile tightened. The area has changed since you were here regularly, Mr. Mercer. I can see that. Stonehaven Ridge has spent a considerable amount of money improving this corridor. We widened sections of the road, upgraded drainage, installed security, and established emergency procedures. I did not ask you to do any of that. You did not need to. The board acted for the benefit of the community. She pulled several papers from the folder and held them through the bars. The first had the Stonehaven Ridge letterhead across the top. Beneath it were signatures from board members and several paragraphs about traffic control, liability, safety, and restricted access. I read it once. This is a board resolution. Correct. Where is the deed? Rebecca blinked. This is not a title hearing. Good. Then it should take about 30 seconds to show me who owns the ground under your gate. Grant shifted his weight beside the booth. Rebecca noticed him and lowered her voice. Your family may have used this road historically, but that does not exempt you from current access procedures. Used it historically? I handed the resolution back. My father maintained this road for 40 years, and now the association maintains it. That still does not tell me who owns it. Rebecca closed the folder halfway. Mr. Mercer, I did not drive down here to debate property law beside a security booth. Neither did I. I drove down here to go home. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she opened the folder again and removed a single sheet. Since you are refusing to accept the access policy, I am required to give you this. She passed it through the gate. Across the top were the words Notice of Unauthorized Entry. My name was already printed beneath them. So was the make of my truck and my license plate number. I looked up. You prepared this before I got here. We knew you might attempt to enter. How? Rebecca did not answer that. Instead, she pointed to the bottom of the page. This confirms that you have been notified. If you cross the checkpoint without authorization, security may contact the sheriff's office. May. They will. She handed me a pen. Sign acknowledging receipt. I read the notice from top to bottom. It claimed Stonehaven Ridge had authority to regulate entry through the gate. But again, there was no deed reference showing the association owned North Cut. If I sign this, I am only confirming you gave it to me. Correct. I am not agreeing that you own the road. You are acknowledging the notice. Fine. I signed my name and wrote the time beside it. Rebecca took her copy and slipped it into the folder. Her shoulders relaxed a little. She thought the signature had helped her. I folded my copy and put it on the passenger seat. It helped me too. Now I had her decision in writing. Are we finished? She asked. Almost. I looked toward the guard booth. A laminated map hung beside the radio. I had noticed it earlier, but from this angle I could see the whole thing. A red line left Stonehaven Ridge, crossed the gate, followed North Cut past the ranch house, and continued toward the county highway. Small letters beside it read Secondary Fire and Evacuation Access. I pointed through the glass. What is that red route? Grant turned toward the map. Rebecca answered before he could. Internal Emergency Planning. It runs across Mercer Ranch. It is an approved access route. Approved by who? Rebecca closed her folder. We are done here. That was the first time she sounded less certain than annoyed. I got back into my truck and started the engine. Before pulling away, I looked at the map one more time. The ranch house sat about 1.5 miles beyond the gate, but North Cut kept going past it, nearly 2 miles in all before reaching the northern county highway. Stonehaven Ridge was not simply blocking a road to my ranch. Their own emergency plan appeared to depend on that same road. And judging by how quickly Rebecca ended the conversation, she did not want me asking why. I drove away without arguing because Rebecca had finally given me something more useful than an open gate. She had given me questions. About 1/2 mile down the county road, I pulled onto the shoulder beneath a cottonwood and picked up the notice from the passenger seat. The language sounded impressive until I read it slowly. Association Authority. Controlled Access. Community Safety. Unauthorized Entry. What I did not see was a parcel number for the ground beneath the gate. There was no deed reference transferring North Cut to Stonehaven Ridge. No recording number tied to ownership. I took out my phone and called the county recorder's office. After 2 transfers, a woman answered. County Recorder, this is Linda. Hi, Linda. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am trying to track down an old road agreement connected to Mercer Ranch. Do you have a recording number? Not with me. It would have been filed under Henry Mercer, probably sometime in the 1980s. I heard her keyboard. What kind of agreement? Road or access? North side of the property. The road was always called North Cut. Give me a minute. While I waited, I opened the photograph I had taken through my windshield at the gate. The emergency map was visible behind Grant's shoulder. I zoomed in until the words became readable. Secondary fire and evacuation access. The red route crossed the gate, past the ranch house, then continued north. Linda came back on the line. I found something from 1987. Henry Mercer is one of the parties. What does it say? I cannot interpret it for you, but it is recorded as a road and access agreement. There is a survey attached. Can you tell whether it was ever terminated? More typing. I am not seeing a release link to it. Can I get a certified copy? Yes. You can order it online. I looked toward town. I am 20 minutes away. I will come get it. That works too. I thanked her and hung up. I was about to pull back onto the road when my phone rang. Unknown local number. Daniel Mercer. Mr. Mercer, this is Grant Miller from the gate. His voice was lower than before. Everything all right? I need to be careful about what I say. Then be careful. He paused. Our company was told this morning that Stonehaven Ridge had full authority over that checkpoint. After you left, I asked our supervisor for the property authorization behind the access list. That surprised me. Why? Because if this is actually a boundary dispute, my guards should not be telling a landowner he is trespassing based on somebody's spreadsheet. That made sense. Grant was protecting his company as much as he was helping me. What did your supervisor say? He asked the HOA for the supporting documents. And Ms. Caldwell was not happy about it. I waited. Grant continued. She also removed the emergency map from the booth. I looked at the photograph on my phone. Right after you left. Did she say why? She said it was outdated and should not have been displayed. Was it outdated? I do not know. But it was part of the security packet we were given when we took over this gate 4 months ago. That was useful. Grant, I am not asking you to get in the middle of this. I know. I just do not want my people in the middle either. Fair enough. One more thing. Go ahead. When I asked who authorized your name being flagged, I was told it came directly from the HOA president's office. I looked down at Rebecca's notice. So it was not automatic. No, sir. Thanks for telling me. That is all I can say right now. We ended the call. I sat there for another minute, looking at the road ahead. Rebecca had known my name. She had prepared a notice before I arrived. She had personally ordered my access revoked. And the moment I asked about the emergency route, the map disappeared from the booth. I still did not know whether any of that was illegal, and I was not going to pretend I did. I needed records, not guesses. 25 minutes later, I walked into the county administration building and gave Linda my identification. She returned with a certified document and an attached survey folded inside a large envelope. Here you go, Mr. Mercer. I carried it to an empty table and opened the survey first. North Cut was exactly where I remembered it. Then I read the agreement. My grandfather's name was there. The neighboring parcel was there. So it was a limited right to use part of the road. I read that section again. Then I compared it with the photograph of Stonehaven Ridge's emergency map. The red route continued well beyond the section described in the old agreement. I was not ready to say what that meant, but I knew who could. At the bottom of the survey was the name of a local firm I recognized, Ellison Land Surveying. I took a picture of the recording number, found their office number, and called. Ellison Surveying. I am trying to reach Mark Ellison. May I ask what this concerns? I looked down at North Cut running across the old paper. Tell him Daniel Mercer has a boundary question about Stonehaven Ridge. The woman went quiet for a second. Stonehaven Ridge? Yes. Hold, please. That pause told me Mark might already know more about this road than I did. Mark Ellison did not take the call. His receptionist came back and said he was in the field until late afternoon, so I left my number and went back to the county records room. If Mark knew something, I could wait. The paperwork was already there. Linda helped me pull the original Stonehaven Ridge development plat, then the filings for each expansion that followed. I carried everything to the same table and started with the oldest map. 11 years earlier, Stonehaven Ridge had been nowhere near North Cut. The first phase sat almost 2 miles east of the Mercer boundary. Then the developer added another section. 3 years later, another. Streets moved west. Utility lines followed. A drainage project appeared near our southern pasture. By the latest plat, the neighborhood had reached the edge of land my family had owned longer than I had been alive. You finding what you need? Linda asked as she passed my table. I am finding more things to look up. She laughed. That is usually how property records work. Can you pull anything tied to emergency access for the western expansion? Do you have a year? I gave her the approximate date from the map. She returned with another file about 15 minutes later. Inside was an emergency services exhibit. I opened it and immediately recognized the route. North Cut. On the county filing, the road was labeled as an existing secondary access corridor connecting the development to the Northern County Highway. Existing. I read the word twice. Stonehaven Ridge had not created North Cut. Their own filing acknowledged that it was already there. I checked the supporting pages. One referenced a private access agreement. Another cited a survey book. Neither said the HOA owned the road. I wrote down every recording number and asked Linda for the related documents. You are going to need a bigger table, she said. I am starting to think I need a bigger folder. By noon, I had deeds, plats, access agreements, drainage easements, and utility records spread across 2 tables. The paperwork showed plenty of property belonging to Stonehaven Ridge. Common areas had been transferred to the association. Certain roads had been dedicated. Utility easements were clearly described. Every time ownership changed, there was a legal description and a recorded instrument showing it. I kept looking for North Cut. Nothing. At 12:30, my phone rang. Mark Ellison. Daniel. Thanks for calling back. My receptionist said Stonehaven Ridge. They put a security gate across North Cut. Silence. We're on North Cut, near the western entrance to their development. Do you have a survey? I have my grandfather's old one and the development plats. That is not what I asked. I smiled. Mark had not changed. No current survey. Good. Then neither one of us is going to guess. Fair. I worked for the original developer about 8 years ago. Boundary retracement before they expanded west. I sat up. Do you still have the file? I should. I keep everything. Do you remember the line? I remember there was a reason we recovered the original monuments instead of relying on their planning map. What reason? Daniel, I am 67 years old. I do not testify from memory, and I do not give boundary opinions over the phone. When can you look? Tomorrow morning. We agreed to meet at his office at 8. Before hanging up, Mark asked one more question. Did they build the gate recently? 4 months ago. Interesting. Why? Because my retracement is older than that gate. Let me find the file. After the call, I went back to the development deeds. Near the bottom of one early filing, I found a survey reference that matched the book number Mark had mentioned. I requested it. When Linda brought the copy, I laid it beside the latest Stonehaven Ridge plat. The western property line ran close to North Cut, but it did not appear to reach the center of the road. I grabbed a ruler, then stopped myself. A photocopy and a ruler were not a survey. Mark would handle that tomorrow. Still, there was enough on the page to make me look twice. I called the county planning department next. I am trying to confirm ownership of an access corridor shown on the Stonehaven Ridge emergency plan, I said. The clerk asked for the parcel number. That is part of the problem. The route appears to cross Mercer Ranch. She searched for several minutes. I can see the emergency access exhibit, but I cannot tell you who owns the underlying land from this file. Can you tell me whether the county granted Stonehaven Ridge ownership? The county does not grant private ownership through an emergency planning exhibit. That was the clearest answer I had heard all day. So the exhibit shows how they plan to use the road. Correct. Not that they owned it. Correct. Ownership would be established elsewhere in the property records. I thanked her and hung up. By then, I had been at the county building for nearly 5 hours. I gathered the documents and carried them to my truck. Rebecca had shown me a board resolution. The county had shown me an existing private road, a limited access agreement, and an emergency plan that depended on that road. What I still had not found was the one thing Rebecca should have been able to produce immediately if she was right. A recorded document saying Stonehaven Ridge owned North Cut. As I put the folders on the passenger seat, my phone buzzed with a message from Mark. Found the retracement file. Be here at 8. I looked west toward the ranch. Tomorrow we would stop comparing paperwork and put the property line back on the ground. If the old monuments were still where Mark had recorded them 8 years earlier, we would finally know which side of that line Rebecca Caldwell had built her gate on. My phone lit up with Mark Ellison's name just after 7 the next morning, while I was sitting in my truck outside a diner near the county line. I let it ring, not because I did not want to talk to him, but because I was looking west toward the ridge, and for a minute I was 14 again. Northcutt looked like a line on every map I had spent the previous day studying. Growing up, it was just the road home. My grandfather Henry bought the ranch when this part of the county was mostly pasture and timber. By the time I was old enough to help, my father Robert was running it. Dad taught me to drive on Northcutt in an old blue Ford that stalled if you let the clutch out too fast. The first time he put me behind the wheel, I nearly dropped the passenger tires into a drainage ditch. He grabbed the dash and said, "Easy, Daniel. The cows are not chasing us." I can still hear him saying it. Every spring, Dad and I worked that road together. We cleared branches, cleaned the culverts, hauled gravel into washed-out spots, and reset fence posts after storms. There was nothing impressive about it. It was work that needed doing, so we did it. Years later, when Stonehaven Ridge started going up east of US, Dad barely mentioned it. One afternoon we were repairing a fence when I asked whether all those new houses bothered him. He looked toward the construction equipment in the distance and shrugged. Their land. Their business. Then he pointed at the fence post I had set. "This one is leaning." That was Dad. He did not care what somebody did on their side of a line. He cared very much about knowing where the line was. After Grandpa Henry died, Dad kept every property document in a green metal cabinet in the ranch office. Deeds, surveys, tax receipts, road agreements, fence records. He labeled everything by hand. I used to give him a hard time about it. "You planning to open a museum?" I asked him once. He closed the drawer and said, "No, I am planning for the day somebody remembers this land differently than we do." Back then, I thought he was being dramatic. Sitting there 30 years later with an HOA notice telling me I needed permission to use Northcutt, I wished I could buy him a cup of coffee and admit he had been right. Dad died 6 years ago. I kept the ranch, but I was not there every week anymore. My work took me around the state. My sister lived 3 states away, and a local rancher leased part of the southern pasture for cattle. I came back for repairs, taxes, and whatever else needed attention. Sometimes a few months passed between visits. Apparently, that had been enough time for Stonehaven Ridge to decide an old ranch road was theirs to manage. My phone rang again. "Mark." This time I answered. "Morning. You ignoring surveyors now?" "Only before coffee." "Then bring some." I found the file. 20 minutes later, I walked into his office carrying 2 cups. Mark was already unrolling maps across a conference table. He was tall, gray-haired, and still wore the same battered work boots I remembered from years earlier. "Black?" I asked, holding up 1 cup. "You remembered. Dad said never trust a surveyor who puts cream in his coffee." Mark looked at me. "Your father put enough sugar in his to qualify as syrup." I laughed for the first time since I had reached that gate. Then Mark's expression turned serious. "I was sorry to hear about Robert. I never got a chance to tell you." "Thank you." He nodded toward the maps. "He called me once about this road." I set my coffee down. "When?" "During the Western expansion. 8 years ago." That was new. What did he want? Same thing you want. He wanted to know where the development stopped and Mercer Ranch started. Mark laid his retracement beside the old family survey. "Your father was concerned because contractors were getting close to Northcutt. Did they cross it?" "Not while I was there." He pointed to several marks on the survey. "We recovered the original monuments. I documented everything and gave Robert a copy. I knew exactly where that copy probably was. The green cabinet." Mark looked at the folder I had brought from the county. "Now show me where they put this gate." I pointed to the approximate location on the aerial map. He leaned closer. "You are sure?" "I stood in front of it 2 days ago." Mark picked up a pencil and marked the spot. Then he compared it with his old boundary line. He did not say anything for several seconds. "What?" I asked. He rolled the maps back up. "I am not answering that from a table." "So what are we doing?" He grabbed his equipment case. "We are going to the ranch." I looked at him. "Rebecca will not let us through the gate." Mark headed for the door. "Who said we are starting at her gate?" Mark did not take us anywhere near Rebecca's gate. We drove north on the county highway, turned onto an older gravel entrance, and stopped beside the weathered wooden post I had checked 2 evenings earlier. The grass around it was knee-high, but the old Mercer marker was still there. Mark unloaded his equipment while I carried the county records and his retracement maps to the hood of my truck. "Start with what you know," he said, "not with what somebody wants the line to be." He set up his equipment, checked the first control point, then moved along the northern boundary. I followed at a distance. Anything? I asked after 20 minutes. Yes. Good anything or bad anything? Surveyor anything. Give me time. That was Mark's way of telling me to stop talking. He recovered another monument near the fence, then a third farther south. Each one matched the locations from his 8-year-old retracement closely enough that he finally let himself nod. These are holding. Meaning your father's survey did not wander away while nobody was looking. We worked south toward the section closest to Stonehaven Ridge. From a rise in the pasture, I could see the top of the security booth through the trees. Mark entered measurements into his equipment, checked them against the recorded plat, and then pointed toward the gate. Show me exactly where the western post sits. We approached from the Mercer side without touching the gate or entering the subdivision. Mark took several measurements. Grant spotted us from the booth and walked over. Mr. Mercer. Morning, Grant. He looked at Mark's equipment. Survey. Boundary retracement, Mark said. Mark Ellison. Grant nodded. I need to call this in. Go ahead, I said. We are staying on my side until Mark tells me otherwise. Grant almost smiled. That is actually what I was hoping you would say. He stepped away with his radio. Mark checked another point, stared at his screen, then checked it again. Well, I asked. He pointed toward the western gate post. Preliminary only, Daniel. I still need to calculate and certify it. Understood. That post appears to be on the Mercer side of the recorded boundary. I looked at the steel post. How far? Enough that I would not call it a rounding error. Before I could ask another question, Rebecca's SUV came down the road inside Stonehaven Ridge. She stopped near the booth and got out. What are you doing? She called. Mark kept working. I answered. Checking the boundary. You cannot conduct work on association property without authorization. Mark looked up. Ma'am, which monument are you using for the association's western boundary? Rebecca stopped. Excuse me. I am asking which recorded monument your gate placement was tied to. Our contractors followed approved plans. Great. Do you have the survey? She looked at me instead. Daniel, this needs to stop. Mark quietly said, I will take that as a no. Rebecca heard him. Who are you? Mark Ellison, licensed surveyor. Her expression changed slightly. Ellison, yes. You worked on this development 8 years ago. Now she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Then you know Stonehaven Ridge has access rights here. Mark capped his marker. Access rights and ownership are different questions. Rebecca opened her mouth, but Grant spoke first. Ms. Caldwell, our supervisor is also requesting the property authorization for the gate. She turned toward him. I told your company our attorney is handling it. Yes, ma'am. They want the recorded document for the file. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Rebecca finally looked back at me. You are turning a routine access policy into a legal dispute. No, I said. I asked to drive to my ranch. You gave me a trespass notice. She went back to her SUV without answering. Mark watched her leave, then returned to his equipment. Friendly neighborhood? They are warming up to me. He gave me a look. Do not get cute. We still need the documents. By early afternoon, Mark had enough field measurements to prepare a preliminary overlay. We went back to his office, where he placed the Mercer boundary, the Stonehaven Ridge plat, the 1987 agreement, and the gate location on one drawing. The result was clearer than I expected. The access agreement covered only a defined portion of North Cut. The emergency route shown by Stonehaven Ridge continued beyond it, and the gate installation appeared to cross the recorded Mercer boundary. Can they still have some right to use the road? I asked. Possibly. Easements can be complicated. That is a lawyer question. I know one. I called Sarah Whitmore, the attorney who had handled Dad's estate. She asked me to send everything. Less than an hour later, she called back. Daniel, did they actually install the gate across the line shown on Mark's overlay? Right across it. And Rebecca personally gave you a written notice saying you cannot pass through? I have my copy. I heard pages moving on her end. Do not lose it. Was not planning to. I am serious. And do not touch the gate. Do not block their residence. Do not give them a second dispute to hide behind. I just want access to the ranch. Good. Keep it that simple. She went quiet again. What is this emergency exhibit you sent me? Stonehaven Ridge lists North Cut as secondary fire and evacuation access. I see that. Let me pull the development title records. She called again late that afternoon. I found something. What? When the western expansion was approved, the developer certified that secondary emergency access would remain available through an existing private corridor. Private. That is the word in the filing. I looked at Mark's overlay. Does it say Stonehaven Ridge owns it? No. Does it say the HOA can stop me from using it? No. Sarah paused. Daniel, do you understand the problem they may have created? I looked at the red route running across the map. I think I am starting to. Their neighborhood appears to depend on continued access through a private corridor, while their president is claiming authority to exclude the owner connected to that corridor. I leaned back in the chair. 2 days earlier, Rebecca had treated North Cut like an HOA driveway. Now we had a survey, an old agreement, and the development's own filing telling a very different story. Sarah spoke again. Do not call Rebecca tonight. I was not going to. Good. Tomorrow, we give her one chance to show us the document she thinks gives the HOA that authority. And if she cannot, Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then let her decide how far she wants to take this. Rebecca did not wait for us to call her. At 8:30 the next morning, Sarah and I pulled up outside the gate, and Grant stepped out of the booth before I had even parked. She knows you are here, he said. Sarah glanced at me. That was fast. Grant lowered his voice. The camera flags Mr. Mercer's plate automatically. Still, I asked them to remove it. The HOA declined. Sarah looked through the gate. Perfect. Grant raised an eyebrow. Perfect. It saves us from arguing about whether the restriction is still active. A minute later, Rebecca's black SUV appeared around the bend. This time she brought 2 HOA board members with her. One was a gray-haired man I recognized from county meetings years ago. The other was a woman carrying a binder against her chest. Rebecca got out and looked at Sarah. And you are? Sarah Whitmore. I represent Daniel Mercer. Rebecca gave a short nod. Then you can explain to your client that arriving with a surveyor yesterday did not change our access policy. I am not here to change your policy, Sarah said. I am here to find out what property right you believe allows you to enforce it at this location. Rebecca opened her folder. We have been through this. Good. Then this should be quick. Sarah held out her hand. Show me the recorded instrument. Rebecca did not move. The gray-haired board member looked at her. Which instrument? Sarah answered him. The deed, easement, assignment, or other recorded document the association believes gives it authority to prevent Mr. Mercer from crossing North Cut to reach his ranch. Rebecca pulled out the same board resolution I had seen twice already. Sarah read the first page, then handed it back. This is an internal resolution. It establishes the security policy. I understand what it establishes inside your association. I am asking what gives your association the underlying property right. Rebecca's voice hardened. Our legal counsel reviewed the development documents. Then give me the recording number, and I will pull it myself. The woman with the binder turned toward Rebecca. Do we have that? Our attorney has the complete file. Sarah nodded. Call your attorney. Rebecca looked at her. Right now? You are stopping my client from accessing his ranch right now. Grant stood beside the booth pretending to study his tablet. The 2 board members were no longer looking at us. They were watching Rebecca. She took out her phone, walked several yards away, and made a call. We waited. When she came back, she looked irritated. Counsel is unavailable at the moment. Sarah checked her watch. Then Daniel is requesting access to Mercer Ranch. Denied. On what recorded authority? I am not doing this all morning. Rebecca turned to Grant. Do not open the gate. Grant did not touch the controls. Ms. Caldwell, my supervisor has instructed us to document any denial involving Mr. Mercer until the ownership question is resolved. Then document it. He did. Sarah looked at me. Anything else you want to ask? I looked at Rebecca. One thing. Did the board know the western gate might be outside the association boundary? The gray-haired man turned sharply. What? Rebecca stared at me. That survey is preliminary. That is why I said might. He stepped closer. Rebecca, what is he talking about? She answered without looking at him. Mr. Mercer hired a private surveyor who is disputing the gate placement. Mark Ellison, I said. The man's expression changed. Ellison surveyed the western face. Yes. Rebecca closed her folder. This is exactly why we should not be discussing technical property issues at the entrance. I agree, Sarah said. Open the gate, and we can stop. Rebecca looked at Grant. No. Then she turned to me. Daniel, if you attempt to enter again, I will call the sheriff. Sarah leaned toward me and spoke quietly. Do not move the truck. I nodded. Rebecca must have taken the silence as a challenge, because she pulled out her phone. I am serious. So am I said. I am sitting right here. She made the call. She told dispatch that a previously warned trespasser had returned to a controlled HOA entrance and was refusing to leave. Sarah said nothing until Rebecca hung up. Then she asked, "Did you tell them there is an active boundary and access dispute?" Rebecca slipped the phone into her bag. "Law enforcement can sort it out." Sarah looked at me. "All right." "What?" Rebecca asked. "Nothing." 20 minutes later, a county patrol vehicle pulled onto the shoulder. Deputy Michael Hayes stepped out and spoke with Rebecca first. She handed him my unauthorized entry notice and the board resolution. Hayes read both, then walked over to us. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes." "Ms. Caldwell says you have been notified that this is restricted HOA access." "I have." "And you are trying to get through the gate?" "I am trying to reach Mercer Ranch." Sarah handed him our folder. "Before anyone treats this as trespassing, Deputy, you should see the recorded road agreement and the survey information." Hayes opened the folder on the hood of his vehicle. He read quietly for several minutes. Then he looked toward the gate. "Who owns the land under that structure?" Rebecca answered from behind him. "Stonehaven Ridge controls the entrance." Hayes turned around. "I asked who owns the land." Nobody spoke. He looked back at the documents, then at Rebecca's. "Resolution. Ma'am, do you have the deed? Our attorney has confirmed our authority. Do you have the deed with you?" Rebecca opened her folder. For the first time, she did not immediately pull something out. Hayes waited. So did everyone else. Finally, he walked back to his patrol vehicle and picked up the radio. Rebecca followed him. "Deputy, he has already been warned." Hayes nodded. "I understand. Then what are we waiting for?" He looked at Mark's preliminary boundary overlay one more time. "I am waiting for my supervisor." Rebecca stopped. "Why?" Hayes closed the folder. "Because I am looking at a real property dispute, ma'am, and an HOA notice does not settle one." A few minutes later, another county vehicle appeared at the far end of the road. Grant looked through the gate, then at me. "That is Sheriff Reed." Rebecca turned toward the approaching vehicle. She had called law enforcement to remove me. Instead, the first question they wanted answered was the one she had avoided since the day I arrived. Who actually owned the ground beneath her gate? Sheriff Thomas Reed parked behind Deputy Hayes, stepped out, and spent a few seconds looking at the gate before speaking to anyone. Rebecca walked toward him with her folder open. "Sheriff, thank you. This should be straightforward. Mr. Mercer was formally notified that he does not have authorization to enter through this checkpoint." Reed looked at Hayes. "You read the notice?" "Yes, sir. And the other documents." "That is why I called you." Rebecca's expression changed. Reed took the folder Hayes handed him and rested it on the hood of the patrol vehicle. Sarah stood beside me without saying anything. The HOA board members stayed near Rebecca. Grant remained by the booth. Several residents had stopped their cars inside the entrance, and a few more were watching from the sidewalk. Reed read Rebecca's notice first. Then he looked at the 1987 road agreement. "Mr. Mercer, this is the agreement your grandfather signed?" "Yes." "And this is the survey your surveyor prepared yesterday?" Sarah answered. "Preliminary overlay. The certified version is being completed." Reed nodded and turned to Rebecca. "What document is Stonehaven Ridge relying on for this gate?" "The development agreements and the association's authority to manage access." "Can I see the recorded document?" Rebecca handed him the board resolution. He read the first page. "This tells your security company what the board wants enforced." "Correct. I am asking what gives the board the property right to enforce it here." "Our council has reviewed that." "I heard that part." Reed handed the resolution back. "Do you have the deed or recorded easement?" Rebecca started flipping through her folder. The gray-haired board member beside her spoke quietly. "Rebecca, is that not in there?" "Charles, please. I am asking because you told us the association controlled the road." "We do control it." Reed looked up. "Then there should be paperwork showing the basis for that control." Rebecca pulled out the emergency access exhibit. "Here." Reed read it, then passed it to Sarah. "Ms. Whitmore." Sarah pointed to one line. "This identifies North Cut as an existing private corridor used for secondary emergency access. It does not convey ownership to the association." Charles stepped closer. "Private corridor?" Rebecca shook her head. "That is old language from the developer." Sarah looked at her. "Then show us the newer document." Rebecca said nothing. A woman from the board opened her binder and started searching through it. I have the Western expansion approval, she said. It says secondary emergency access must remain available. Charles looked at Rebecca. Is that this road? It is more complicated than that. Is it this road? Rebecca looked toward the residents gathering behind the gate. Yes. That answer traveled through the group faster than anything else she had said. A man near the sidewalk called out. So this is our backup exit? Charles turned toward him. Apparently. Rebecca raised her voice just enough to regain everyone's attention. None of this changes the fact that the association has maintained this entrance for years. Reed closed the folder. Maintenance is not the question. A pickup pulled onto the shoulder behind us. Mark Ellison got out carrying his equipment case. Sarah had asked him to come in case the boundary became an issue. Rebecca watched him approach. Again, she said. Mark nodded politely. Morning. Reed introduced himself and asked what Mark had found. I recovered 3 recorded control points yesterday, Mark said. They matched my prior retracement. I am still preparing the certified survey, but I can show you the line on the ground. Do it. We walked toward the western gate post. Mark set up his equipment and checked the points again while everyone waited. Grant came out of the booth. Charles and the other board member followed. Rebecca stayed a few feet behind them. After several measurements, Mark pointed toward the gate post and then toward the security turnout. Based on the recovered monuments and recorded boundary, portions of this installation appear to extend onto the Mercer side. Charles stared at the post. How do we build it there? Rebecca answered quickly. The contractor used approved plans. Grant looked at her. Our company did not install the gate. We only operate it. Nobody said you did, Rebecca replied. Reed turned to her. Who approved the location? The board approved the security project. Charles looked at her again. Based on whose survey? Rebecca did not answer. Sarah took out the development certification she had found the previous afternoon. There is one more thing the board needs to see. She handed it to Charles. He read the highlighted section, then read it again. What does continued access through an existing private corridor mean? It means exactly what it says, Sarah replied. The western expansion was approved with secondary emergency access using this corridor. It does not say the HOA owns it. Charles looked from the paper to North Cut. So we depend on this road? Sarah chose her words carefully. Your filed emergency plan appears to depend on continued access through it. And we just gave the Mercer family a notice saying they cannot use it? Nobody answered him. Reed finally spoke. Here is what I can tell you today. I am not deciding title on the side of the road. That requires the proper civil process and complete records. But I am also not treating Mr. Mercer as a trespasser based on this HOA notice when there is a documented ownership and access dispute at this exact location. Rebecca stepped forward. Sheriff, are you saying he can ignore our security? I am saying your security policy does not resolve a property rights dispute. He pointed to the folder in her hand. If you want law enforcement to remove this man from this road, you need more than an HOA resolution. Charles took a slow breath. Rebecca, open the gate. She stared at him. The board has not voted on that. The woman with the binder spoke before he could answer. Then call an emergency meeting. Right here. 2 more board members had arrived while Mark was surveying. Charles looked around at them. Fine. Rebecca's confidence finally slipped. You cannot conduct board business like this. Charles held up the development certification. You called the sheriff in front of half the neighborhood. Rebecca, I think we are past keeping this quiet. Grant stood beside the gate controls, waiting. Nobody was looking at me anymore. Every eye was on Rebecca. She had spent 3 days insisting I needed to prove I belonged on North Cut. Now, in front of her own board, her security company, the sheriff, a surveyor, and the residents who depended on that road, she was the one being asked to prove she had ever possessed the authority to keep me out. The gate did not open that morning because Sheriff Reed ordered it open. It opened because, for the first time, the Stonehaven Ridge Board had to look at the documents Rebecca had been avoiding. Charles Bennett called the meeting right there near the security booth. 5 board members were present, enough for a quorum under their rules. Sarah stayed beside me while Reed and Hayes stepped back. Neither officer wanted any part of deciding HOA business. Charles held up Rebecca's notice. Before we vote on anything, I want one answer. What document did we rely on when we told security Daniel Mercer had no access? Rebecca looked toward the residents gathered inside the gate. Our attorney reviewed the development records. Charles shook his head. That is not what I asked. The woman with the binder turned several. Pages. I cannot find a deed for North Cut. Another board member said, neither can I. Rebecca crossed her arms. We have maintained that entrance for years. Charles looked at her. We have been over that. Maintenance is not ownership. Nobody argued with him. He pointed toward Mark's equipment. We have a surveyor saying part of our gate may be across the Mercer line. We have county records showing an old private access agreement. We have an emergency plan that depends on this road. And we have Daniel standing outside a gate trying to reach his ranch. Until our attorney can show us something different, I move that we suspend the restriction against him. The motion was seconded immediately. Rebecca objected. You are making a decision without complete legal review. Charles looked at her. That is exactly what we apparently did when we restricted him. The vote was 4-1. Rebecca was the only no. Charles turned to Grant. Open it. Grant looked at Rebecca, then back at Charles. I need confirmation from the board president or the security contact on file. The woman with the binder raised her hand. I am the vice president. The board just voted. I will sign the instruction. Grant nodded. That works. Rebecca said nothing. He stepped into the booth and pressed the control. The steel gate started sliding aside. 3 days earlier, that sound would have felt like a victory. Standing there now, it mostly felt strange. I had never wanted a neighborhood meeting, a sheriff, or 5 people voting on whether I could drive down a road my father had maintained before Stonehaven Ridge existed. I just wanted to get to the ranch. Grant walked over while Sarah gathered our papers. Mr. Mercer, I am removing the trespass flag from our system. Thank you. And for what it is worth, I am sorry. You asked for the paperwork when things stopped making sense. That is what you were supposed to do. He nodded. Rebecca stood near her SUV while the residents started asking board members questions. One man wanted to know whether North Cut was really their emergency exit. Another asked who had approved the gate location. Charles told them the board would release an update after council reviewed the records. Rebecca tried to answer one question, but the vice president cut in. We need to verify it first. That was the last thing I heard before getting into my truck. I drove through the gate at 5 miles an hour. Nobody applauded. Nobody needed to. About 1.5 miles later, the ranch house came into view behind the cottonwoods. The barn roof needed work. One section of fence was leaning. The place looked exactly like what it was, a ranch that had been waiting for somebody to come home and take care of it. Over the next week, the temporary decision became harder for Stonehaven Ridge to reverse. Mark completed his certified survey. It confirmed that portions of the gate installation crossed the recorded Mercer boundary. Sarah finished reviewing the title history and found no transfer giving the HOA ownership of North Cut. The old agreement provided limited access rights, but nothing close to the blanket authority Rebecca had claimed. Stonehaven Ridge's attorney eventually sent Sarah a letter withdrawing the unauthorized entry notice. The board also suspended Rebecca's authority over security decisions while it reviewed how the gate project had been approved. I never asked for the details of that review. I had what I needed. A few days later, I went into the ranch office and opened Dad's old green metal cabinet. Mark had been right. There was a copy of his 8-year-old retracement in a folder labeled North Road. Dad had even clipped a note to the front. Check monuments before any new work. I stood there for a while with that note in my hand. Then I laughed. Yeah, Dad. I got there eventually. That afternoon, I fixed the loose hinge on the barn door and walked part of North Cut before sunset. Nothing about the road looked important. Gravel, grass, fence posts, drainage ditches. That was probably why it had been so easy for somebody else to start treating it like theirs. The next morning, I drove into town for supplies. When I returned, Grant was working the gate. My truck rolled toward the booth, and this time he did not reach for the radio. He looked at his screen, pressed the control, and the gate opened before I came to a stop. I slowed beside his window. Morning, Mr. Mercer. Morning, Grant. He glanced toward the road behind me. You are good to go. I looked through the open gate at North Cut stretching toward the ranch. Appreciate it. Then I drove home.